Thanks, guys. So this is going to be not about me, but more about you guys. So we're going to try and get you guys to be a little bit interactive, but don't worry, I'm not going to put you on the spot or anything like that. So we're going to be talking about data and some of the experiences that I've had with information and dealing with the amounts of data in here. But I'm really interested as far as what you guys are dealing with in this realm, as far as your different aspects of it. We talk about large size data, big size, and different velocities of data that are coming about. So anyway, we're going to be talking about and exploring what you're experiencing in the realm of data. I'm going to share with you what I've experienced on this, and then actions that I've taken about managing a lot of information across that, and then what are the use cases that we're getting out of this when we're combining all the different types of data. When we usually start with, say, AMI metering, that was the big data. Since 2011, it's been, for me, it's been AMI, and people call me up saying, what kind of AMI use cases should I be developing? And I'm like, well, I'm just a sales guy, you know. I'm like, well, you guys are in the energy. What are you guys telling me? The idea is that we have so much information that we have out there, we're not sure where to take this. And I think when we start unraveling this behemoth of data that's coming across, doors start to open. We had some great speakers today. We've gone from AI, we've talked about programming, we've got analytics in this. And each one of those stages really opens things up. And AI is really kind of driving this a lot for us recently. And it opens up a lot of doors and a lot of different areas for us to go into. When we have the information together, it's lying to me. It's not working, Sasha. Teasing you. I had to click it 3 times. We talk the information together. When I'm looking at, you know, operations or whatever within utilities, I have the different realms to be able to look at AMI information. I can look at, you know, system planning, for instance, across that. Then you have customer programs, meter analytics. And this is sort of the matrix of ops for me. When I look at this, when I have these boxes filled in, I can take this data and go across these different realms. And this is where use cases expand for me. No longer am I just looking at AMI billing. I could look at assets related to the AMI usage. I can go through and look at network operations, and I can tie my network ops into what's happening with my OMS information, my ADMS information. And that's precisely what I did in my project that I recently worked on at a utility, was bringing information together across these different stations. So when we were looking at this, we wanted to take in information on on the project of the utility. They said, okay, we've got some ADMS information, we've got some OMS, we've got AMI. What are we going to do with this stuff? So we want to be able to put the data into data stores, analytic base tables, be able to conjure up different use cases. And we'll have a list of these, and we're going to hit these for you as far as what we're doing with the information from that. But being able to look at this and operationally look at reliability, taking that CI information that we're looking at, customers interrupted, SAIDI, SAPI, taking all those elements across those as far as what they're being engaged on. And if we have this information together, can we make a difference? Can we make an impact on this? And so the test case on this was basically bringing the information together and being able to create references across these. Now remember that matrix I had 2 slides back. That's basically what we have here, bringing that information together from here. How many of us are working with GIS information? And the struggles that we have with GIS, right? Sometimes it's not accurate. Specifically when we're trying to map to our different devices that are out there. And then we're trying to map that device to different organizations that we might be tied in there as far as the vendor information that we might have associated with that when we're talking about the different assets across those. Well, we can take those device information that we have within our systems, adjust those with the GIS information, and now those dots become relevant, right? So we saw the GIS image of the points where we saw structures out there. And that's tying that information together. So precisely what we're doing with this. We take those, we have a point out there, now we can see that the device out there, there's a fuse at this particular location as part of this structure and expand on from those areas. But then what if we were to take that information and bring in more of that SCADA information, the AMI information in there? So we have alerts that we have from AMI meters. So what's happening within that structure relevant to the meters that are assigned to that. And those aren't necessarily easy to match up as well, because now we have to take our meters to the specific locations and then be able to say, okay, what's happening within those and what's the association of those. Expand that to our outage management systems. So we have our outage management systems out there, which tells us where we've had issues or impacts on there. And how does that relate from there? So you can see how we kind of building out this matrix across the data that we have relevant to us and expands out a whole gambit of different types of use cases for us operationally on these. And then taking this up into SCADA information where we're taking substation data, we're looking at load profiles, we're looking at system loads over seasonal areas, and then taking those alerts all the way through to back into our OMS systems across that. So this process here, being able to generate references across these different data forms, that's really the key that we have and a lot of the struggles that we have across this. How do we make these interrelate? We were mentioning early in our previous conversation or previous presentation about we have different types of data. We have numeric data, we have text data that need to be matched up together in here. And that's where we need to create these reference points across this to match this up. One thing that I found when I was doing in this example here, because I was working a lot of network analytics, it was based on the GIS. Because I have devices out there like transformers, and they would have a GIS file for that, location for that, which I could tie that back into my circuit segments or my circuit definitions within that. Likewise, when I have my OMS systems, that's calling out device number. The device number, could I tie that back into my GIS as well? So that's where I created a generated key on this, was all based on the lat long values originating from the GIS to map that information together in here. So there's many different techniques that you can use around that. I'm interested in what you guys are doing to map your data together. Now, we had a great example earlier about bringing in different text data and with numeric data, how we have to do those examples in here. And we're going to get into more about what you guys are having or what you guys are doing within those. But this is basically a process that we've developed in here to address several different types of use cases across the board on here. With these information together, we were able to address pretty much all of these use cases in relatively fast and proficient ways to do this. The interesting thing is about once you have this together and assembled for you, then you have somewhat of a way to get in there with the AI perspective of this to answer some of these questions that we want to from this. But to show you some of the examples that we had from the output from this project, one of the key things was looking at small wire issues. So these are where we're looking at this GIS information, and we have the line segments across those in here. And we have ratings for those line segments. So we had ratings of those, say, 300 amps. And they'd go from 300 to, or from 600, say, to 300 to 150 and to 200, and maybe you go back up to 300, and we'd have this hanging or this wire problem because we have a wire rating that goes from a 300 to a 200, back up to a 300, and you have hanging capacity that's out there. And that's a challenge that the utility was having. Being able to do this practice, we were able to identify very quickly across 42 different circuits, specific areas that they had these issues. The challenge is being able to identify that is hard to do unless you have the ability to basically map that data across there and be able to search through that. And they didn't quite have that process in there. But then we also related that to the brownout systems that they had from the AMI meters. And it was interesting that we saw that where we had capacity problems from the small wire analytics, that there was actually areas within that where they had the brownouts alarms coming out from the AMI meters were associated with the small wire placement that they had issues or challenges on there. And then we were able to quickly create a dashboard that we showed them, hey, we've got, oops, sorry guys, knock you off there. We had small wire issues, and we could say, okay, we want to mitigate, we want to change these wires, how much is it going to cost us to do that? And that was pretty much based on $180,000 per mile to basically adjust or create or to mitigate those wire issues in there. And then we drove that back into seasonal and peak loads. We wanted to find out which capacity problems or challenges did we have out there based on seasonal seasonal challenges that they had within their network systems in here. And we were able to address this with all of our with our matrix, if you will, that we created from that. And this is an example of some of the, and we had some GIS questions about here, and everyone was, my team was like looking at me, Tom, you going to say something? No. So this is biding my time. So this is an example of GIS reporting that we have within the application that we developed from here. So we're looking at AMI meter readings, and you're seeing the bubble charts there on the AMI, along with the line segments within the circuits themselves within those. Those are the hot zones that we were identifying within those. And from here, you could actually select those specific hot zones within that, pull up the device or drill into that to look at the different structures from those, and then be able to identify, okay, do I have a small wire issue within those sections, within those areas from that. So that's my kind of real world example as far as bringing information and data together. So I'm interested in what you folks are working on right now. So let's talk a little bit about the size of information, size of data that we're working from in here. Now, who here is working with data that is wider than 25 columns? Raise your hand. Most of us. How about more than 50? A little less. More than 100? I expected that. Southern California doesn't raise their hand. Yes. How about more than 125? It's interesting because I would have said I'd say about 125 would have been about the max width that we have in the data sets that we're bringing into, and a large propensity models that we're working from in here. When I'm working with a large data set with wide propensity data on here, it's generally going to be something that I'm doing on a propensity model. I'm looking for something that happened or looking at cause and effect in those areas from those in here. Now, I know that we have depth of data across here. So now how many, we had, I heard 16 million rows. Do I hear 20 million? Yeah? Do I have 30 million? Yeah, I see heads nodding through here, right? The depth of rows, that's almost insurmountable. I mean, you're going to continue on to where we have a million rows or so across that we're bringing from our information or from our data in here. So how about your data sources that you're bringing together? How many data sources in one of your databases that you've created? What's the widest amount of data or most amount of data sources that you brought together? Has it been 5 sources? Anybody more than 10? Okay, anybody more than 30? Those that are doing more than 10, what type of analytics are you doing? Just doing data marts from that, presenting data to your customers from those areas. Okay, so when we were working with forecasting, Mariko, we were working with forecasting on there. How big is what's the size of your data set generally? From
that one I'm not sure because that just came under my group.
Mm-hmm.
We just moved that one under our.
Okay. Yeah, so we have various amounts of data in here. What I'm trying to do is just interject about how much information that we're dealing with at any given time or any processes in here. So we've got some seeded questions across here that I'm going to present to us. So when you've brought your information together, what are you guys finding out there? What has been one of the more interesting things that you found in your data analysis? Yes.
So one that I would say. Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. One that I would say is surprising, but like not that I'm surprised about the data, like I'm just surprised at the technology itself. Like we know that technology is so advanced, mm-hmm. but there's people that are still managing data in somebody's desktop or and they're updating that and they're saying, hey, I'm a project manager and I'm updating my project here on this spreadsheet. Can you integrate it into your dashboard? And I'm like, how can you just have it on your desktop? Like that to me is surprising, and it's something that I have to combine into my query, like it as a source for my data set.
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? The compute power you have on your desktop these days are pretty vast in those, and then people will just add hard drives onto their desktop, right, as far as expanding on that information. How many people here are working from their PC? And you have a lot of data that you get to work through from those aspects on there, right? And then, well, if you're looking at departmental dashboards in here, I know that we had a lot of work on departmental dashboards in here. Let's go into, I'm more interested, I think, in the third one there. What's the role of cloud and AI and the data architecture and solving your challenges that you're doing right now? Because I think that AI can open up the doors for a lot of us. In my experience, when I'm working with AI, how many of us are saying, going to ChatGPT and saying, hey, write me a Python code to combine data sets, or write Python code to do this or to that on here? All right. How many? I mean, don't be sheepish. It's the thing to do. Everyone does it. I will do it as well, to do that, to put that information together, to put that through. It'll get me about 80% there, but then you got to watch out, right? It'll get you within those areas in there. So when you talk about AI, yes, Mariko.
One statement I just wanted to make about using cloud.
Yeah.
Because we're a city municipality, things move a little bit slower, and we're bound by unions. And unions don't like to make huge changes, especially when it affects the workforce. So for example, going back in the day, even just going to the PC, they did not want us using the PC when it first came out. They wanted the secretaries to type up the memos. I mean, everything had to be done a specific way. So as we're starting to evolve and trying to convince our, executive management that we do need to move towards the cloud, it's been a very slow process for us. And I think that's true for a lot of city municipalities.
Yes. Has anyone else had similar challenges? I know that 5 years ago, going to a utility and talking about cloud infrastructure, it was hit or miss. Most of the utilities were saying, we're not going there. And then now the utilities have opened up to that. What are your thoughts on that, on your experience on that? Do you think that that's going to, yes, in the back.
I also work for a very, very small municipality doing water quality. So my question, I guess, is more for the group. Like you said, that utilities are more open, but how did that happen? Because I just am meeting from the mayor to the planning board to everybody meeting with roadblocks, and I can't move forward even showing them what we're able to do. So if anybody has any suggestions.
I'll just comment that for us, SAS has provided my company with the pathway of showing what the cloud can do, how we can move data systems onto the cloud. Another challenge I think for municipalities is being able to make money on these things, and so the biggest hurdle for us was going from asset-based, homegrown assets to being able to capitalize cloud investments and bring those into your cost other than just an expense.
Yes.
I'm Dan Williams from ISO New England, and we manage, as many of you know, a lot of what we call stakeholder data. And it's very proprietary and very sensitive data. And so getting buy-in from our participants in the New England market with us moving that data into the cloud, it took well, it's not done. We're just starting to make the move. in small ways, but it took a lot of convincing, a lot of time at very senior levels of management before we could even begin to do that.
Was that a big question about this, the governance layer of that, the security of those?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of participants were very resistant to us doing that. Mm-hmm. And when large utilities don't like what the ISO is doing, they usually take a political approach to trying to stop our plans. Yeah, so it's a very careful negotiating process and a slow one.
It seems like that's opening up a little bit more now. People are getting more accepted with cloud. Yes, in the back.
Yeah, I also want to share. So I'm from New York, Consolidated Edison. So we're only 5 years old using SAS to help us build a risk management program. So we start off with internally, we're very, very conservative, especially in risk space. So the decision was build a on-premise solution. So now five years later, I'm here. One reason is to find out what's new, and the direction is go onto the cloud in years. So it's very challenging, but with today's technology advancement, it seems like our internal IT, this overall corporate direction, we have to figure out how to really adapt and really move on to cloud. So the other thing I want to share, your first question was the most surprising insight we've gained. So we are only 5 years old using SaaS solution to help us build a fraud monitoring program. So it's very surprising. Traditionally, if you see accounting department, procurement department, all siloed. They have their own ERP system implemented in the past years. But we never look across. So when we try to build this program, we try to position to look the disconnect, the handoffs between the two business functions to look for potential risks. So we do feel this is a tremendous, kind of eye-opening kind of opportunity internally to see what we can bring to the company, by what we did, just a small baby steps in the first beginning 5 years.
Wonderful, great. That's an excellent example. That's a great insight that you gained from those. If you look at back on the governance thing, if we're talking about, I know as an outsider coming into a utility and speaking to what SAS, when we talk about SAS via, right? You're going to see all around we're cloud enabled, we're on all the platforms as far as that's concerned, whatnot. To talk to them, to governance, and we always have to talk about some layers of security, some layers of authentication, the ability for now, what we're running on, how can we control all those? Are those the kind of questions that you have internally when you talk about going to cloud? What kind of conversations are you having when you meet with, say, your stakeholders, your teammates? What are you meeting when you have that governance conversation or that cloud conversation? Jim.
What we're starting to see with conversations with stakeholders now is they're kind of pivoting to say, from a security standpoint, the cloud, especially the major providers, are probably more secure than our on-premise environment. So
yeah,
that's what we're starting to hear more of, and so those are experts in what they do, and there's a lot more trust these days.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Jim's like one of my directors, so he kind of planted that one on me. No. Yeah. Manib?
I was going to add to that. One of the customers that we're talking about. Yeah, I was just going to add to what Jim was saying. A lot of the customers now, I think, when we're talking to them, they are recognizing that our core business, like SaaS, is data. So protecting that data is so important to us. And a customer was actually telling me that our core business is keeping the lights on, doing that stuff. And they've come to the realization that the data is actually probably safer on the cloud because that's what we do. Like if you can't protect data, you're not going to be in business. So now that mindset is shifting to where, okay, actually maybe the safest place is on the cloud now, because that's their job. That's what they're going to do better than anybody else. So, I've seen that shift over the last couple of years where some companies 2 years ago where there were no cloud, no way they're going to go to the cloud. Now they are more open to it. Now they are, things like certifications, FedRAMP, all those things that we have now, we can show customers and then also references. So, we can help customers with that, like, hey, you want to talk to someone else, you want to talk to people in other industries or people in the industry. From our perspective, we can kind of help and take, to hold their hands on that journey. And then I guess the other part of that question that you had up there is, what's the role of cloud AI and just the architecture change? What does that enable? From my perspective, I think what that enables more than anything is ultimately productivity. Because with cloud, you're more scalable, so you can work with bigger data sets than you have ever in the past. As well as, AI, the core goal of AI is productivity. So things like making models faster, doing forecasting and all these things faster. That's what it comes down to. I think that's what we're trying to unleash and use AI for ultimately.
Thank you.
And for us, it's the same thing, right? I mean, cloud is more secure today than it was before. It's efficient governance, right? Because governance takes time, governance takes people and processes, and by having it integrated into a cloud solution, just builds efficiencies into those support structures, right? Because you bring a governance organization in and people get worried, right? But if you have governance built into these cloud processes, it makes adoption easier, right? And it makes governance efficient, which is something that doesn't happen very often. But cloud solutions oftentimes enable that.
It's an excellent point. I have found that in speaking to infrastructure and just administration areas within those, it's hard to have, for not just for any company, basically to have that administration tasks. They look at that as more of an overhead type of thing, and you can put that in the cloud. It's more dispersed. It's more readily available to that. You can have remote services to be able to manage that. Also with data centers, the expense of having a data center when you're working with all the information and the data we have within the companies, utilities, corporations, they have data centers themselves, and they have to have those repeated areas. I mean, like someplace like a Southern California Edison, for instance, they'll have multiple data centers in there for recovery, disaster recovery out there. You don't have to have that with the cloud, right? The cloud's repeatable. It's more managed within those, and the costs have come down quite a bit. Yeah.
I had a customer, not a utility, but a customer that works with the utility, lots of them, and they're owned by investors, and their CTO told me just recently that there's too much risk in their business processes being in their private data center. They want them in the cloud. They're like, they're no longer interested in them owning that, whether they viewed it as a risk. I didn't get the whole explanation behind it, but I thought it was a really interesting comment that they were being told to do, and they have a lot of utilities data.
Mm-hmm.